Morning, grade 7. Today we're going to talk about percent of a number. Now I'm going to warn you, some of you are going to find this lesson to be a little bit trickier than the last 2 days' lessons. So please ask me for help if you need it on the chats when you get to this lesson. So what I'm going to do is part of my lesson is going to be explaining why something works, like why we get to an equation. And then part of it's going to just be how to use that equation. So obviously pay attention to the whole thing. But if you're somebody that gets overwhelmed with the why of something works and it's confusing to you, if you just understand how to do it at the end of the lesson, that's fine with me. Some people really groove on the why and they think it's super interesting. And then for some people, it confuses them. So don't worry, I'm going to do my best to go, okay, now this is the part where you really need to know it. So let's start with the why. So let's say we had a question, what is half of 80? Now, I guarantee you that all of you could say, well, Miss Nayef, that's easy. Half of 80 is 40, right? If I were to give you $80 and I said, give me half back, you could tell me it's $40. That's pretty simple. But now let's think about this word half. If I think about half, I can think about that word in a couple different ways. I can think about it as a fraction. What is 1/2 of 80? And if you think back to our fraction lesson, we would go 1/2 times 80, you multiply the top, you multiply the bottom, and you would get 80 over 2, and then you would get 40, okay? But then I can also think of half as a decimal, 0.5 or 0 5/10 times 80. And then I can multiply that out, right? I can set up my equation with decimals. I can do 80 times 0.5, and I'll again end up with 40. But then remember, in this unit, we've been talking about how fractions and decimals connect, but then how fractions and decimals also connect to percentages. So another way I can do that is I can do this. What is 50% of 80? So I want you to sort of see how all of these words are connected. So we have half, which we can write as a fraction, which we can write as a decimal, which we can write as a percent. So we can end up with this type of question. What is 50% of 90? Now, when we're taking a look at this question, what I want to do is I want to break it down. Remember I said at the beginning, we're going to find the percent of a number. So this number is my whole number. Let's say that's what I start with. And then this one, 50%, is my percent. And then this word what is really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out the part. I'm trying to figure out a part of a whole. So I'm saying if I have this whole number, oops, I didn't mean to cross it out. I meant to highlight it. If I have this whole number and I want to know 50% of it, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is 50% of that whole number? Okay, so in this case, I'm doing what is 50% of 90? But actually, what we can do is we can create this as an equation. We can say that the part, right, that's the part of a number I'm trying to figure out, is actually the percent times the whole number, which really on this last slide, that's what we were doing, right? We did over here, let me switch my color, we did 1/2 times 80, we did 0 5/10 times 80, and we did 50% times 80. So when I'm looking over here, I can come up with this equation. And this is the first way to solve percent of a number, is using an equation. So grade 7, the first part was explanation as to why this equation works. Now this is the equation you need to be able to use. The part equals the percent times whole. So let's say I'm trying to answer this question. What is 50% of 90? The what is the part. I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to put the letter P. So the part equals the percent. Well, my percent is 50% times my whole, which is 90. So that's my first thing. I write up my equation. Then my second thing is I'm actually going to change my percent to a decimal. And remember, we just worked on that yesterday. When you change percent to a decimal, you divide by 100. So I know it's going to be 0 5/10 times 90. Now again, some of you can do this in your head, but if you can't, that's fine. You can go over to the side, do 90 times 0 5/10. Bump your decimal out of the way once. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 9 is 450. I don't need to bother with the last 0 because I got 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 9 is 0. But then I bump the decimal back in, and I get that my part equals 45. Which again, this one I probably could have done in my head. What's half of 90? What's 50% of 90? It's 45. But I wanted to show you how this equation works. Part equals percent times whole. This is what you need to be able to use on our quizzes and on our tests on the rest of the unit. So let's practice that again. What is 2% of 240? So here's our equation. Part equals percent times whole. I don't know my part, so I'm going to write the letter P. I'm going to write 2% times 240. So my first step is I write it out. My second step is I convert that 2% into a decimal. Again, if you don't remember how, we divide by 100. And when we divide by 100, we move our decimal place over to the left. So I get 0.02 times 240. Feel free to go to the side. 240 times 0.02. And I get 2 times, I bump my decimal out, 1, 2. Or I can just ignore it if that's how you want to think of it. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. And then I bump my decimal back in twice. 1, 2. So I get that my part equals 4 8/10, or 4.8. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying that this 4.8 is 2% of 240. Now, grade 7, here's just a little tip when you're thinking about percents of a number. One thing you can always know, my dad always reminds me of this, if you have a number like 240, that's 100% of that number. If you want to know 10%, you move the decimal place over once. So 24 would be 10%. If you want to know 1%, 2.4 would be 1%. So if I think, okay, my answer over here for 2% was 4.8, does that make sense? It does, because I know that 2.4 times 2 is 4.8. That's just a bit of a side. If you can always know what 10% is and what 1% is, it'll make it easier for you. Okay, let's try one more. So now we have what is 0.5% of 20. Now remember I said to you yesterday, just because there's a decimal in there doesn't make it not a percent. Because it has that percent sign, we treat it as a number out of 100. So I'm still going to follow the same steps. I want to know the part. The percent is 0.5. Don't forget the percent sign. Times the whole of 20. Second step is convert that percent to a decimal. So I divide by 100. So I'm going to move my decimal place over once, twice. I've lost the percent sign, and now I have a decimal times my 20. So you can go to the side, write it in. You can bump out your decimal or just ignore it and remember to put it in afterwards. So we multiply, we get 0 on our first line many, many times. Then we have a 0 to hold place value. Then I do 2 times 5 is 10. Then look, I had bumped my decimal 1, 2, 3. So I bump it back. 1, 2, 3. So I end up with my part of a number is 0.1. Now, let's think about that. If we go back up to this number 20 here, 10% of 20 is actually 2. 1% of 20 is 0.2 because I'm just moving my decimal over again. So it makes sense that 0.5%, so less than 1%, is even smaller than my 1% here. Again, that's just for mental math of checking on your work. So grade 7, that was the first way. That was using this equation, part equals percent times whole. So that's one way to find the part or the percent of a number. Now we're going to learn the second way. Again, I'm going to start with the explanation why. So pay attention, but if you get stuck on the why, that's okay. I'm not testing you on the why, I'm testing you on using it. So the second way to find it is to use a proportion. So let's start with our same equation that we figured out before works. Part equals percent times whole. Now what I want to do is I want to set this up, as a proportion. So I want to have two ratios that equal each other. So what I've actually done here is I said to myself, I want to get this percent all by itself. I want to get the percent by itself. So how do I get percent by itself? Well, what's happening to it? This is algebra. It's being multiplied by the whole number. So I'm going to do the opposite. Look over here. I divided by the whole number. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. But now look, a whole divided by a whole, those are the same things. Those cancel out. So I end up with this proportion. Part over whole equals percent. I haven't actually really changed my equation. I'm just setting it up in a different way. But if part over whole equals percent, let's take it a step further. Again, this is still the y. So here's what we came up with on our first screen. Part over whole equals percent. Now, what do I know about percent? I know this. Percent means out of 100. So look, I can make it look more like a ratio or a proportion because I don't know what n is, but I know percent is out of 100. So now, this is our new proportion that we're going to be using. So we're done with the y. Now we're going to do the how. This is what I expect you to be able to know how to do. Part over whole equals n over 100. So let's take a look again at this question. We have what is 15% of 90? Remember that what is asking me the part. The percent, this 15% is obviously the percent, and this 90 is my whole number. So what I've done is I've taken this equation over here, part over whole equals percent, and I fill in what I know. I don't know what the part is right here. See, that's what I'm trying to figure out. But I know what the whole number is. The question told me that. The whole number is 90. Then, from over here, this equation, I know that percent is out of 100. So I can write this as a ratio, 15 out of 100. So now, grade 7, what I should be able to do, this is what I have essentially. Part over 90 equals 15 over 100. I should be able to solve this using cross products. This is why we've been practicing cross products. So I'm going to go across. So I get 100p equals 15 times 90, right? I want to cross this way. So I get 100p equals 15 times 90. Now I'm just going to do a bit of erasing just to give myself some room here because I need to know what is 15 times 90. So I go 90 times 15, 5 times 0 is 0, 9 times 5 is 45, place a 0, 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 9 is 9. I'm going to add it up, and I get 1350. So now I go back over here, 100p equals 1,350. I've simplified my equation. Now I want to get the letter p by itself. What's happening to that letter? It's being multiplied by 100. So I do the opposite and I divide. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. This cancels out. So I get the part, the letter p, is 1350 divided by 100. I can do that very easily because I know when I divide by 100, I actually just bump the decimal place once, twice. Oops, my finger did not show that. Once, twice. So I get the letter p is 1350. So let me go back to over here. What is 15% of 90? Does that kind of make sense that 1350 would be 15% of 90? Well, let me think about this. What would 10% of 90 be? I bump it over. Well, 10% is 9. So it makes sense that 15% is a bit more than 9. It's 1350. Okay, let's do that. Let's see, 2 more times. So again, this is the how, right? So I'm going to just write over here. This was my equation that we're going to be using. Part over whole equals n over 100, whatever that is. So now we have what is 8% of 50. So again, this what is the part. I don't know what the part is, so I'm going to write part. What's the whole number? Well, it's 50. It's like me saying, I'm going to give you 8% of my $50. And you want to know, well, how much money is Miss Naive actually going to give me? But then this second side, this right here, I'm going to write the percent. But I'm not going to write it as a percent. I'm going to write it as a ratio out of 100. 8 out of 100. Then I'm going to use cross products. All right, so I get 100p equals 8 times 50. Then I'm going to simplify. 100p equals, well, 8 times 50. I can do in my head 8 times 5 is 40 and then add the 0. So I get 40 and I get 400. Then again, I ask myself what's happening to that letter p. It's being multiplied by 100. Do the opposite and divide. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. That cancels out. And p equals 4. So let's go back. Remember, I was asking myself up here, what's 8% of 50? Well, what would 10% of 50 be? Bump over your decimal. 10% equals 5. So does it make sense that 8% is a little bit less than equals 4? Yes, it does. So again, grade 7, this part I just keep doing because sometimes with percentages, it's easy to get lost in the steps and not know if you actually have the right answer. This just helps you estimate if you have the right answer. All right, let's do one more because I think my lesson's getting a little bit too long. So here we have, again, a decimal in our percent. It does not mean our percent is a decimal. There's just a decimal inside. So part over the whole equals that percent as a fraction. I don't know my part, but I do know my whole. My whole is 20. Like maybe I'm going to give you 0.4% of 20 bucks. How much money am I actually going to give you? Not a lot. Let me tell you that right now. So my 0.4%, 0.4%, I now need to write it as a fraction. So 0.4%, that means I have 0.4 out of 100. But when I work with a fraction, I don't want to have a decimal in my fraction. So I'm actually going to multiply the top and the bottom by 10. So I actually get 4 out of 1,000. This 4 out of 1,000 is the same as 0.4%. I just don't want to deal with a decimal in my fraction. So I get 4 out of 1,000. I'm still going to do cross products. So now I have 1,000p equals 20 times 4. 1,000p equals 80. Divide by 1,000 on each side. So now I get 80 divided by 1,000. Remember, with division, number on top goes in the box. So I get 80 divided by 1,000. So now 1,000 does not fit into 8. It does not fit into 80. I'm going to place a decimal on the top and the bottom. It does not fit into 800. 1,000 does fit into 8,000 8 times perfectly. So now it ends up that my part equals 0.08, which is really 8 cents. So if I offered to give you 0.4% of 20 bucks, I'm giving you 8 cents. So again, grade 7, on your lesson, you're going to have numbers 1 to 4. You need to use the first way I showed you, using this equation. Part equals percent times whole. Okay, use an equation. But then on the second part, you need to be able to use a proportion. So set it up this way. Again, I don't care if you don't know the why. As long as you can set it up like this, then we'll be good to go. So chat with me if you get stuck or have any questions, and I hope you have a great day.